Hello, 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 and welcome once again to The Orbit, episode 10. Can you believe it? Double digits 10. I'm your host, Azrael as it gets, joined as always by my fellow Eternal Orbit teammates and co-hosts, Mr. Exile's Rhythm and Mr. Rude Clouds.
What's up?
Gentlemen, how the heck are you?
Doing well. How you doing today, Az?
I'm doing well. I'm still fighting a cold, so my voice is a little scratchy. I'm going to try not to surprise cough into the mic, but other than that, I'm doing well. Got to play. I've actually got to play some Hearthstone for the first time in a couple of days. The last 2 days, which I wasn't really in the mood to play because I wasn't feeling very good since.
Oh my god.
Yeah, since the reset. So I finally got to play the last couple of days and having fun experimenting with or playing with something that isn't Rogue, Warrior, or Bomb Hunter. So, but we'll get to that later. How have you guys been?
I've been doing well over here. I had a super annoying ladder day on Saturday. It was one of those days where you spend like 7 hours trying to climb, and you end up in the exact same position that you started at. Yeah, never the dream. So that wasn't very fun. But since then, we've put in some positive work. I'm hanging at rank 2-1 right now. So
Nice.
Successful in that vein. I'm still digging the Pally, which
Pally are you playing?
pick. The secret mech Pally.
Nice.
It's definitely the one Pally out of the 100 games that people play that they say, "Hey, I face Paladin," which is always nice, and it does well against Warrior. And
Nice.
that's really my only excuse to play at this point.
What about you,
So,
X? What have you been up to?
So played 2 days of Hearthstone this week, Monday and Tuesday, about 2.5 hours apiece.
Mm-hmm.
The first stream I ended because I played against the second Warrior of the day. Then yesterday I ended my stream because I played against the first Warrior of the day. Now, what you should be taking away is that that's 5 hours of Hearthstone and only 3 Warriors. I'm doing something right.
Yeah, clearly.
Whatever garlic clove Hearthstone version that you found to ward off the Warriors, if you could patent that and like bottle it, you'd make a fortune overnight on eBay.
Let me help you out. Just play a deck with a bunch of death rattles in it, and then the matchmaker won't put you against Warrior.
There you go.
Interesting. Almost like there's an algorithm that somehow is in play. Anyway, so what else is going on, guys? I mean, there's not a whole lot going on in the Hearthstone world in general right now. I mean, we're pretty well settled into the expansion. We're starting week 5 now of the expansion. It looks like as far as tournaments, since Worlds ended, there isn't really a whole lot. There's one little tournament. Was it the Esports Arena? What's the title of it? Esports Arena.
Yeah, Esports Arena Hall of Heroes.
That's the one. There was that little tournament, which a little side note about that, which we'll get into more later. There were 12 professional contestants. It was a specialist style tournament. 9 of the 12 decks that were entered were all Rogue. Go figure. But we'll dive a little bit more into that when we kind of talk about what's going on with the meta. But just a side note on that, it sounds like Zalay won, and he won with a very standard kind of temp rogue and a couple variations of it. So congratulations to him. I think the top prize in that was $2,000. So good on him. Yeah, it was $2,000. I just checked. He beat Firebat, who got second place, with also playing rogue, who took $1,500. So other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot going on in the Hearthstone scene at large.
A lot of what's happening right now is either to come or has already happened, which is going to be, that's kind of my own little allusion to the upcoming, our sort of main piece of the meat of the show, where there's been a couple things between one, there's some new content coming out with Hearthstone, which is always exciting, and then there was also an earnings call that Blizzard had just to go over Q1. And I know earnings calls normally aren't something that people are like at the edge of their seats for, but it's exciting when it provides context to things like the way Blizzard is viewing Hearthstone right now, and the decisions that they're making because of it. So yeah, we're in sort of a weird state because as we brought up and we'll bring up later during our 10-minute meta, it seems like we're getting to the point where things are starting to stagnate with Hearthstone.
Already
from a certain level. Yeah, exactly. So
4 weeks in.
So yeah,
it took Gen and Baku like 8 weeks to stale the meta. I mean,
yeah.
Well, yeah. The interesting thing about Gen and Baku though is I think Gen and Baku created a lot more. Ironically, I'm defending Baku being back in the meta, but
I think
it created a lot more opportunity because it made classes viable that otherwise wouldn't have been, just because the power of its ability to adjust your hero power. So interesting how losing something as bad for the game can also be bad for the game.
It's like when you kill all the mosquitoes in a forest, how it crushes the ecosystem,
Yeah, exactly.
When you kill the mosquito that is Baku.
That's a big mosquito.
Wow.
She kind of looks like one though, let's be honest.
That's a really great analogy though. Like, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, here, and I'm good getting into the meat of it, because I think, this will give us something to address a little bit, and sort of our thoughts on where Hearthstone is right now.
One more thing before we dive into the meat, though. The Twitter poll, my friend. You didn't mention the Twitter poll.
Yes, the Twitter poll. Thank you for bringing this up, because I remembered earlier today, I always forget to mention it, and I have to be reminded at the start of every show. And so I'm keeping the streak alive. So yeah, everyone here, if you're new to the show, we do something every week for The Orbit where we'll ask a poll. We'll ask a question on our Twitter account, twitter.com/eternalorbit.gg. And it'll be an open poll for people to answer how they feel about a certain subject. And then that's running throughout the show. We look back at it later on to see what people said and sort of react from there. So this week's poll is going to be based off of the news that kind of they brought up already with the solo content that's coming out maybe next week, maybe the week after, who knows? Which is, how often do you play Hearthstone single player content? So and this is out of pure entertainment, not like you have a quest and you have to do it to get your pack or whatever. This is just, hey, you open up the client and you say, you know what? I feel like playing Dungeon Run today.
Right.
How often does that happen? So we actually have a pretty, a little bit more of a varied result than I expected, to be honest, as it stands. That's going to be my tease for now, because we'll return to it at the end of the show. But it's not entirely going the way I expected. So that's interesting.
I think you'll be particularly surprised, Eric, at how I voted in the poll, but
I can't wait to hear.
Well, you told us. You told us
did
what
I tell
you've been
you?
doing certain times while you're offline, which is cursing out and saying, I'll never play solo content. Getting like the tattoo design and everything. Look, very proud of it.
Right here on the wrist.
Never solo.
And then on the knuckles. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, please vote. I put the link in the chat for anyone who is here live with us. If you are interested, we'd be very interested to see what you have to say about this, because I clearly did not gauge the room properly.
Yep. And then after we're done talking about the solo content, we're gonna move into our 10-minute meta segment, which we started last week, followed up by the deck dive segment, and we're also going to do another coaching corner this week. The idea is eventually we're going to slot sock it, but I don't think I should say slot sock on stream. We're gonna socket these segments into and out of the episodes as appropriate. So obviously we're always going to have the main story, but we might not have a coaching corner 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
But we might have 2 decks to deck dive. Again, just a reiteration, if you didn't see episode 9, how we're going to be doing it moving forward, just for complete clarity and fidelity. Without further ado, I want to hear about this solo player content, because you guys spoiled how I voted, which is I'm always playing that shit. I'm always playing that stuff. I love it.
So shocking to me. Probably the biggest shock of all, honestly. But yeah, let's get right into it. So yeah, to set things up really quickly. So Blizzard has officially announced that. Here, give me actually one moment. I literally have my note ready, and I scrolled.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, this is all about drum rolling. So the big news is solo content essentially has its release date out. The name. Wait, no, I'm on the wrong part still. These notes are all over the place. There we go.
Scroll down, my friend.
I'm scrolling.
We have an announcement of an announcement is what we have.
Yeah.
But first we had the announcement announcing that this announcement was going to be announced. That's not even a joke. This is not a meme.
I was
Guess who
just going to
found
say,
it?
it sounds like you're kidding, but you're being totally serious. They announced last week, just before we were going to film last week, they announced that they
Yes.
were going to announce this week more information, which was an announcement that there will be more information coming next week, which may or may not coincide with the release of the actual content.
Eric, can you
There
tell
we
me
go.
what's going on, please?
Thank you.
Please.
It's very thematic. We wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing, everyone knew it, and so we're perfectly on the same page that it's just a lot of build-up and hype. So here's the thing. There's going to be a new, highly replayable adventure that they have announced is most likely going to be called The Showdown in Dalaran.
hmm
This was such a drumroll because we should now be looking.
Oh,
we should-
God.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God. I screwed it up. Get that out of here.
Someone
Get that
See,
out of
people
here.
on the podcast just be
XSplit
glad to
crash.
be
There we go.
listening, XSplit crashed. Anyways, the showdown in Dalaran, like we always plan to announce. So yeah, this will be a part one of a 3-part story, which is super interesting because they've done adventures in the past,
Mhm.
but they've never done a singular story told across 3 separate expansions, which is what this will be. It's going to be following the villains of Hearthstone. They're going to be fighting in Dalaran. Who knows if they're going to win or lose? The next expansion's adventure will be based off of that, and so on and so forth till the end of the year. Each chapter for this, think of a chapter as the wings before with like Naxxramas and Blackrock Depths. So they're calling these chapters. Each chapter will cost 700 gold, and you can buy the entire. There'll be 5 chapters, so you can do it just for whatever 3,500 gold.
Mhm.
But you can also pay $20, kind of like, again, very parallel to the old adventures that used to
Right.
exist.
I think it's the same the price scale, actually.
Right? Okay, that's.
believe it is
wanted to
exactly
say
the
that,
same.
But I was also like, I don't want to do more research. That's not what I'm here. I'm the talent and the look. Anyways, if you finish a chapter, you'll gain 3 Rise of Shadows packs, and if you finish the entire full adventure, you'll get a card back and a golden classic pack, which we have not actually seen in a while.
Kind of cool.
Last time I think that happened was probably 7-8 months ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they had that promotion on Twitch. I don't remember how it worked, but if you linked your Twitch account and then they had something else where you would get a golden classic pack.
Yeah.
Then you
And
can
then-
subscribe to your favorite Azrael as it gets for free one time each month.
Yeah, that one.
Oh,
Sorry.
And so the biggest difference between the old adventures and this one is the fact that when you complete a wing, you won't get a card that's sealed off or anything. Instead, it's just packs. So you may get a card, but you also may get the same 5 in a row.
Right.
Which, is what it is. But a golden pack is interesting. As you can see by the graphic to our left here, I believe, if I can properly. My left screen's right. There's going to be an event that we're not really sure if it's the official release yet or just another tease. But from May 14th to 15th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time, they're going to take 12 Hearthstone content creators, and it's going to be a duke 'em out battle showdown to see who can win. I don't know if it's the most games in a row. They haven't even really done that, but this is, as we mentioned, a tease within a tease within a tease. So,
T-ception.
if anything, at least it's a super cool graphic.
Yeah.
That's kind of the breakdown. What I want to do, now that you've all heard me explain this perfectly, is get everyone's thoughts here. How do you all feel about this switch from, we were just doing a bunch of different types of dungeon runs for the past few expansions. They're going back to adventures and making it, again, this little bit of a payable experience. How do you kind of feel about that? And do you think that this commitment they're making to PvE is really, that it's kind of the right direction to go in?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump on this first. I loved the adventures, the solo adventures. Like, there's still times where I want to go back and create a new account just to do the tutorial, just because it's fun. Like, Blizzard has a really good way of telling stories and making solo content. They're really good at it. They've defined the genre in solo content in a lot of games. So I trust their ability to make a good product. I'm curious to see how replayable it's going to be. When they say that without being a dungeon run, because the dungeon run we've seen in 3 basic versions now. We've seen the actual dungeon runs, the original OG dungeon runs from Kobolds. We've seen the Monster Hunt from Witchwood, and then we've seen the Roscon Rumble from Roscon's Rumble, right? And they're all basically the same design with different spins on it. I think back at the content prior to that, or I look at the Boomsday puzzle content, and I wonder how you can make content like that truly replayable without it being like a dungeon run. So I'm curious. I'm actually very curious and kind of excited to see how it works, but I'm hesitant to wonder how interesting it's going to be if it deviates too much from the stuff that we know in the past has worked. If it's going to be similar to that, I'm curious how they're going to make it fresh every time. But if it's going to be different, who knows? But I know I've bought this kind of content in the past, and I will buy this, and I will definitely try it for sure.
Yeah. X, what about you?
Well, first I just want to talk about how upset I am. Like, when Blizzard said they were going to talk to the community more, be in better communication with the community, I didn't think that they meant they were going to announce the release of new solo content when at the same time they release the expansion, then hype it up again at expansion release, then say a week after expansion release that the following week there's going to be more information, only to say 2 weeks after that we're going to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like
so much communication.
Right? Can we get some can we get some X rages in chat, please? It's funny because it definitely feels like it's a bit of a drawn out tease, and I'm curious as to why it's taking so long. Normally, like solo content comes out pretty solidly like 3 weeks after an expansion, and we're pushing the 5th week, 6 weeks by the time this actually may come out. Now, it would be interesting if at the 14th and 15th they kind of like do this whole like feature thing of it and they release it. Probably the week after that's realistic. So we're going to wait 7 weeks for this solo content.
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes Blizzard is specifically trying to drive people away from their game. The only thing that I was able to find refuge in during the period that was known as the tyranny of Gen and Baku was the solo adventure of Rastican Rumble and Kobolds and Catacombs Dungeon Run.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, didn't like the Witch Hunt. Monster Hunt, but
right.
Only place I was able to find solace in the game, because I still do love digital trading, collectible card games, trading card games, and now they're just we said we weren't going to use that euphemism analogy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just been rubbing me all the wrong ways.
Yeah. Well, and here's something, because again, we've all kind of brought up how is this going to be replayable? What could they possibly do to make this where this is something that fills up the expansion and that we're maybe going to want to return to? My biggest thought, and it actually part of our poll on Twitter, this was answered by someone else, Ashberry, is that they have to make a gold incentive somehow.
Yes.
It could be as minimal as complete a run, get 10 golds, and then that can only be maxed out to 3 times a day. That's sort of my base, and it could be instead maybe 5 times a day or something. But if they really want to make PvE a competitive alternative to PvP in people's mind space, it can't just be, you finish the run, you get your card back, and then you do it out of just the enjoyment.
Right.
It's not a way to make it sustainable and really this highly replayable model. What do you guys think?
I agree. I actually think that's a really good suggestion. They either give you like on the reg a way to get packs by doing it, or the gold. I don't like the model. I don't like the current gold model of you get 10 gold for every 3 wins. That's ridiculous. I've never liked that. I mean, it's funny that I'll play this game for 4 or 6 hours a day, and you invest all that time to get 1 pack of cards. It's I've never liked that. And I don't want to, even if I really enjoy the solo content, I don't want to feel obligated to have to grind it out every day for 30, because then you've got you're gonna play 30 to 50 games of Hearthstone a day to get your 100 gold that way, and then you're gonna play another 30 to 50 dungeon run games to get your gold that way. It feels way too grindy for way too little reward. Make it something easy, like, hey, if you complete a dungeon run, you get 10 gold, and you can do that 3 times a day. Done. Because I mean, are you going to spend more than 6 hours playing the single player content? Come on. I think I think they can tone it down a little bit. I think you can tone it down a little bit and just put a cap on it. So that way, if you want to do it more, you can, but you don't feel like you're incentivized to do it in order to get gold.
Yeah.
Or dependent on, I should say. That's my take. But I like the idea also of having, hey, if you do 3 runs in a day, you just get a pack of the latest expansion. I think that's also fair.
Yeah. And if people feel more incentivized by that, honestly, than the gold. There's plenty of gold quests I'll pass up, but my psychology, when I see a pack show up on the quest screen, I'm like, you know what? I hate to bother my friends while they're in the middle of the game, but I'm going to do it purely because I want to get a pack.
I'm a guy that has literally all of the cards, and I still do those. Because it's just good value. It's like, it's dumb not to do it.
Yeah.
What about you, X?
Yeah.
As far as with the
incentivization.
Yeah, I think that the best thing that they could do is add something to the game in a way to get 5 gold. Because you can get 5 gold in Arena, and then you'll be stuck
That's
with
true.
the end of your gold number until you have another unlucky run where you get 75 gold from your 6-win run instead of 80 gold.
Excellent point.
Oof. Just need a way to round that number off. It's so odd and not ending with a 0. It's tough for me.
And yeah, either way, I am still excited for this. We're not going to delve too deep into it because there is more information about this event, but considering that we will be talking about this in future episodes, we don't want to just, jump out the gate and have nothing left. But yeah, I think if anything, I like the fact again that they're just going back to storytelling, and it should be interesting to see how they try to pull this off because kind of getting ready to transition into this next segment, Blizzard does need that engagement. Blizzard does need people to feel attachment to kind of what they're putting out and having the content that they're pushing be successful. It's time for me to put on my suit and switch this on over to the earning call that Blizzard had. Q1 2019. I can't make this any more sexier for you folks if I tried. First off, very cool graphic. Was happy that we found that. But really, here's the big things to note that came from the call. This is going to be mostly just to provide context for what our main discussion will be for this part. But we'll knock through it real quick. So the few things. First off, they mentioned that Rise of Shadows has had more engagement than the past 2 expansions that have come out. So both Rostacon's Rumble and Boomsday Project. That doesn't mean too much, in my opinion, because of the fact that Witchwood was the expansion that came out before that, and that was a rotation, the same way that this was a rotation expansion where they, there was the most shuffle that had happened in a very long time. It makes sense that it would perform better than the last 2 expansions, but not necessarily Witchwood. Next up, the monthly active users for all of Blizzard's franchises dropped from 35 million to 32 million over the last quarter, which is a pretty steep drop between just a quarter. 3 months of a calendar year dropping 3 million subscribers is definitely not the direction that Blizzard's trying to go in. And really the last final note for what they emphasized here that I've kind of alluded to earlier, their number one goal is increasing the flow and the frequency of in-game content and upfront releases. Basically, they're saying we need to push more content. What we're doing right now is not working. And they're backing it up by saying that they're planning to add 20% more developers across all of their franchises, which includes Hearthstone. So again, this is a sign of them saying every company wants to do better, but this is a sign of them recognizing, what's not going well, and they're having a plan of attack.
So what exactly, just to clarify for the listeners and the viewers, what do they mean when they say engagement?
Great question. So engagement will just be monthly. I mean, I don't want to talk out of my butt, so please stop me if I'm not, because I was not prepared. But I'm assuming just it's monthly action. It's every time someone will log into Hearthstone
and do a thing.
Exactly.
Got it.
Or hop onto Overwatch and play a game.
Right.
That sort of thing.
I think it's a very succinct way of putting it, just so people know what that means. It's a fancy way of saying, are people playing the game or not?
Exactly. And then this next section, before we really break down and digest what this all is about, is just going over some brief Twitch statistics for Hearthstone as a whole and kind of viewership, the average viewership, if you will. So this is a breakdown of what the past 3 years have looked like for April. Starting in April 2017, when Journey to Ungoro came out, Hearthstone was averaging a little over 74,000 viewers a month. Then April 2018 with Witchwood, it went down to 59,000, close to 60, which is a 19% drop. And then finally this past month, I should even say, with Rise of Shadows, it dropped down to 47, almost 48,000, which is a 20% drop, but over 2 years, a 35% drop. This is all coming from Solely Gnome, which is a trusted website with statistics when it comes to Twitch. So I put the link in there just for anyone who's interested and wants to verify. What this really says is what kind of lines up with the Blizzard's earning call. The fact that engagement is down and it has been down for a little bit of time, especially with Hearthstone. But I think as Blizzard, for a company as a whole, they have been in a little bit of a rut. The reason that we bring all this up is, again, we all play this game. We're all invested in it, and we're all invested, I think, in a couple titles when it comes to Blizzard in the first place. So the first thing is we wanted to kind of step out of our shell of Hearthstone for the first time, I think, in the Orbit's history, and start to expand broader into other topics going on. And the first way that we wanted to address it was with this earnings call and bring up, why do we think Blizzard itself is having, this situation that they're in right now? Do you think that it is associated with the frequency and the flow of content that they're pushing? Do you think there's other factors involved? Are they addressing it properly? Like, where do you start with that thought?
Honestly, when did we start believing Blizzard again? Because if we did, stop.
Right.
They just laid off, what was it, 15,800?
Yeah,
I thought it was much more than that.
It was a
community managers for Hearthstone in particular. And now they're saying they're going to add 20% more developers and increase the amount of content after getting rid of all of these community managers. I'm sorry. It sounds like they just gave us a big, fat, flaming Duke of a lie.
Right.
I can't believe that. Either that, or it's just like the owner is not talking to I don't know. There's no communication. There's a bunch of immorality and unethicality going on, and I just don't like it. It feels to me like Blizzard is trying to business up the business space with their businessing instead of giving a crap about the people.
Right.
Because, and we've seen this model in the past where when companies, especially big box AAA game companies, start to care more about the bottom line, what happens? Star Wars Knights of the Old Republics, and now we're talking about, loot boxes being illegal in Germany. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So Blizzard's going the same way, and we see all these warning signs. I mean, next.
I would have to reiterate some of the points that you made. Like, it's important to pay attention to this stuff because it's a reflection of what the company's focus is going to be. And when they show a 35% loss of engagement, this is a Twitch statistic. This isn't a statistic about people logging into the game. We don't necessarily have access to that other than the statistic that we talked about before, which is 32 million versus 35 million. But what this means is that people tend to watch what they find interesting, what they're doing, what they're playing, because they want to get better at it, or they want to watch people that play it better than them. Just like why we watch pro football or pro basketball, pro hockey, we watch it to watch these people play a game that we understand, that we enjoy watching, doing it at the pro level. When people lose interest in that affects the bottom line, right? And when the bottom line gets affected, then the company starts making decisions based on recovering that expected profit margin that they've lost. And when they start doing that, you're at risk of losing player experience in favor of company profits, and that's where the danger comes in. So it's important to keep an eye on this statistic for that reason, because it gives us a kind of a litmus test of where the company's focus might be at. The question I think here is like, is the solo content going to be enough to raise some of that? I think it will be for the casual player, and if it's done in a way that will make it interesting for the streamer to produce, I think we'll see these numbers reflect that. But overall, I think that, and I've said this before, I love this game, right? But I've said this before, that I feel like a lot of the times that the decisions that they make as a company are often irrespective of what a lot of the player base wants. And, we talked about this when we were doing card reveals, and it's like, why are they releasing Mass Resurrect when so much of the community is like vocally against cards like that? And yet they keep producing them, and that's just one example of how it seems like they talk out of both sides of their mouth, where they're like, Peter Whalen will go on an announcement and be like, yeah, we want to take the game in a different direction. So, but Genabaku had to go because we're tired of the sameness of the meta. And then they release immediately in the same announcement information saying this card that does the same thing that they've been doing comes out. It just feels like there's a disconnect. So it's important to pay attention to this kind of information because it reflects kind of where their mindset is at.
Yeah. And, two big points that I really want to hit on when it comes to this. The first one is, and it even was mentioned in chat, but kind of like resting on their laurels. Like, I think one of the biggest issues that Blizzard has had, from my perspective, is the fact that it really hit a home run, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the idea that they have not been able to keep up with that home run pace. We've seen it a lot. Like Knights of the Frozen Throne was the most successful expansion for Hearthstone in its history. And I think you can say a lot of that just because of just the name association. It rung true for anyone who played during World of Warcraft during that lore tie. Like, hey, here's something that I can associate with that was such a big positive. Like, it's recognized as one of the best expansions, if not the best expansion in a lot of people's minds.
Yep.
So this idea that they have this content, and even take it to cards, these old cards that they like the mechanics of, or they were successful, or at least they know that they had an impact, and they keep going back to that to kind of mine for more. Overwatch is really the biggest example I think you can point to in Blizzard's history where they had something new and they crushed it.
Yes.
Absolutely blew it out of the park. But if you take Overwatch out of the equation and you put fresh ideas, whether it's in the space of Hearthstone cards, events, things like that, it's been a little more dry. And so you have to wonder if they have the ability to keep up with these things, or if they may have to just retread older concepts, big hits that people, the fan favorite stuff, and that's how they really survive. And that's how a company kind of falls off, is, even that gets too samey. So that was my first point. I can't remember my second point.
Well, to buy you a moment, something I want to interject in there about sameness is like, there's an interesting article that came out by, or an interview that came out with Colento, and I'm not going to talk about the entire article here, but I will link it in chat when I'm done talking about it. But it's interesting because Colento, who's a renowned Hearthstone player, one of the best in the world, he basically said that, hey, this expansion that was supposed to shake things up and take a different direction is essentially more of the same. And it hasn't really shifted the meta a whole lot. And I think and there's a danger to that, right? Like there's a scariness to that, because if we keep having the same thing over and over and over, people are eventually going to get bored of it. We've talked about this before, and I'll reiterate it again. Maybe the answer for keeping things fresh and it isn't, just putting out new solo content or, new tournament modes. Maybe it's just changing up what is the meta, right? Like Kibler's suggestion of just having a rotating standard deck, or like what they're doing in Arena. And, we talked about that. We postulated this before when we talked about the rotating Arena meta. Maybe that's a prototype for what they want to do with the standard meta. But when you have the same, like, two sets that are the base cards that never change, and then the other cards change a little bit, you're going to have a guaranteed sameness. And I think players are getting to a point where that's kind of getting boring to them.
Yeah. If I can put in one last thought, and then because
Sure.
I remembered, and then X, if you want to step in. I think Blizzard is doing the right job by recognizing what their fault is. They're not reacting quick enough. It is completely right of them to put, even though it comes at the sacrifice of, as X mentioned, community developers or community managers, it is absolutely right to put the power back into content creation and pushing that content for people to digest. Not just with Hearthstone, but Overwatch, they pointed to as a major reason those 3 million players fell off from the 35, is because they specifically pointed to the fact that their content creation was stagnant for Overwatch. And that's brutal to have to admit that in an earnings call to investors.
Yep.
Between that, Hearthstone, as we all know, content creation, we don't really see much outside of weekly tavern brawls, and then every expansion. In between that, though, I can't think of much. They're trying to start with these adventures, like, hey, maybe now we can break up the cycle where there's ways to keep people. We release an expansion, a couple weeks go by, people get a little bit bored, then we flush a little, or then we drip a little bit more content like these adventures in, that gets people back interested, and then maybe, who knows, before next expansion's around. That could be their strategy and why they've delayed the whole adventure that we're about to see, within the next 2 weeks, I would say, at least.
Hopefully.
But yeah, I do think their heart is in the right place. Hopefully they can back up by putting these devs in positions to create that content. Hopefully they can back it up by making the content worth, consuming.
That makes a lot of sense. And you raised a really good point there about having to admit that your cash cow is kind of bleeding, like, to your investors in the first quarter of all quarters, because like that's that's scary. I mean, I just wanted to pick up one more point about what Az said when he was talking about Colento's interview.
Please.
It made me think Colento was over there in his house just thinking, like, what am I gonna say? And then it hit him. He was like, how people still be playing Odd Rogue even though they nerfed Cold Blood? It's 2019.
right?
You take Baku out the deck and you add Waggle Pick. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
But
Right?
sameness.
I'm glad you said that.
One more point that I wanted to interject that you made me think of, Eric, was that the difference with, I guess, with what we're talking about here, though, is that they're talking about replacing what is primarily a player versus player game, either in arena mode or even tavern brawl or on the ladder or the wild ladder, whatever it is. It's a player versus player game, and they're trying to replace the player versus player content with PvE content, which is fun, but you can't do the things in PvE that you can do. You can't take those to any other competitive format. So there's like a translation loss there that, like, I like that they're adding something new to the game, because games that have a strong PvE experience tend to have a strong PvP experience. So I get that, or a stronger PvE or PvP base as well, right? And you see that with WoW. WoW had a really strong PvP experience because they had a massive PvE successful experience, right? But the difference is this game came out first. It would be like retrofitting a game like Overwatch with a complete PvE campaign. That'd be fun for a while, but eventually you want to do the PvP thing. So as long as they're doing this to support that and give you something to do as a break, and not that, this is the direction I want to take it in, because then we're going to see the PvP experience, which what the game is at its heart. What the game is at its heart is a PvP game. We might see that suffer. So that's just one last point I wanted to make.
Isn't that Blizzard's model though, and hasn't it always been PvP? Like, I mean, look at Diablo, look at Hearthstone, look at World of Warcraft, look at that's Overwatch. That's their whole thing. Do they know how to do environment well enough to translate Hearthstone into a primarily casual solo player game?
And that's the thing. You talk about like where Blizzard really shined against some of the glory years were like Warcraft through Warcraft 3. That was those campaigns are iconic,
legendary.
Dude.
Exactly. That's the base. None of this would exist if those didn't really take off the way they did. So that's the tough thing. The talent is there, or was there, I should say, but there have been, there's changes in management. There's a partnership with Activision that I think we haven't really touched on this much, but I think that is very clearly, not clearly, I should say, but I think we could all take a stab and say that is influencing things one way or another. And I'd say for the negative. And so, there's this idea that they can do it. And I always have rose-colored, even in this conversation, I'm like, what? I think Blizzard's going to pull out of it. I think that they're so talented in what they've done that they can. But that's just purely because of the goodwill they've built up from me as a fan. So,
but I agree. I share the same sentiment, because I Blizzard's one of those companies, along with a few other companies, where they've proven themselves to me enough over decades to where I give them the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong. So I have this hope, but it's kind of our job as casters and as hosts on this show to be objective and to look at all the angles, and because we love this game, to be critical of it, because we love it, we want it to thrive and survive, and sometimes that means asking hard questions and making sure that we are being honest about it, to help ensure the survivability of something that we love. Because I want to be playing this game in 10 years. I love this game. And so, that's why I care about this kind of conversation. Because if the things that support the thing that I love fall apart, they're going to stop putting money into it.
Yeah. And anything else, fellas?
Yeah. If Ed stops playing, I'm stopping playing.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just play vanilla WoW. It's fine. Everything will be...
Well, all right then. Well, I think then we can probably move on into the 10-minute meta review here, where this is a segment where we just take a few moments and we look at where the meta has been over the last week. We throw some information at you to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like, and then we talk about what we think we might see moving forward. So, most of you listening to this channel probably play quite a bit of some form of competitive Hearthstone, but for the sake of this 10-minute meta, we focus primarily on the standard ladder. So I pulled some numbers over the last week as far as what the tier deck lists have looked like and what the win rates and the play rates have been. And currently, surprise, surprise, I actually left show notes in notes from last week. And the two show notes from the last week that we had, or two of the show notes that we had, were Rogue is the most popular it's been since release, and it's also the strongest, which it's slightly less strong than it was last week, but it's still very strong. And that Rogue, Warrior, and Hunter dominate the ladder in both win rate and popularity. And what you're going to find is that the numbers that I'm going to give you kind of support that is still true. So when we look at the tier lists right now, there's a tier 1 and tier 2 are the lists I'm going to focus on right now. And as it stands, there is one tier 1 deck right now, which may surprise some of you if you've been playing the ladder a lot. You probably think it would be Temple Rogue, or perhaps Control Warrior, or maybe Bomb Hunter, or some version of Mech Hunter. But the truth of the matter is actually Secret Hunter. And we're going to get into that here in a little bit more as to why that is. But when you look at the win rates of the decks right now and the tiers that they're at, the win rates are almost exactly the same. So you have tier 1, only one deck, which is Secret Hunter. You have tier 2, you have multiple decks in there, but in order, it's next is Temple Rogue, next is Control Warrior, next is Token Druid, next is Mech Hunter. Does that surprise any of you guys?
No.
Yeah. Does that sound like the same conversation we were having over the last 2 or 3 episodes?
Oh, I thought you were actually just listening to what I said in your monitor.
That wasn't just a recording of you saying that, right? That was actually live.
Next after that, we have Mechathune Warrior, Murloc Shaman, Dragon Mage, Bomb Warrior, and Zoo Warlock. That rounds out the top 10 decks in the top 2 tiers. Yeah. Interestingly enough, though, Temple Rogue is still second from the top, but the win rates of these, I'll just go over the top 5 decks right now, are Secret Hunters at a 54% win rate, Temple Rogues at a 52% win rate, Control Warriors at a 52% win rate, Token Druids at a 52% win rate, and Mech Hunter is at a 52% win rate. So these win rates are very, very close. And this isn't a small data sample. This is over 1.5 million games. So these are pretty big numbers. And what it says is we're looking at the same numbers that we had last week. And now week 4 is typically where the meta starts to settle. These numbers indicate, as we were talking about before the show started, that the meta has been settled. And it doesn't look like it's going to get shaken up too much anytime soon. But even though these are the kind of win rates in the tiers of the decks, I wanted to throw the play rates of these decks into the conversation as well, because the play rate data is interesting. Temple Rogue is not the top deck, and it only has a 52% win rate on average. Now, that's a conglomerate of all of the various lists of Temple Rogue that are being playing. So there's some variance, and this list is including Legend through rank 5. So the top 1.5% or so of players playing the game right now. But Temple Rogue is 29.5% of the decks being played right now at rank 5 to Legend. 29.5%. That's absolutely insane. And the higher you go up, the higher that number goes. At rank 1 and at Legend, the numbers are, let me get the exact numbers here. The numbers are, at Legend, it's 31%, and at rank 1, it's 34%, and at rank 2, it's 33%. So the higher you go up, the higher those numbers go up. Even though it's not the highest win rate deck, it's still extremely popular. Yeah. The next most played deck is Control Warrior at 13.5%, which is a huge drop off. Wow. Yeah. And then the next deck after that is Mech Hunter at 11%, and then the next deck after that is Dragon Mage at 8%. But you see, based on the numbers I just gave you, some quick head math tells you that almost 2/3 of the decks being played are Temple Rogue, Control Warrior, and Mech Hunter, which is insane. Absolutely.
Those are just
insane.
archetypes. Like, that doesn't include Bomb Warrior and like Midrange Hunter and all of that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Token Druid, Bomb Warrior, and Midrange Hunter are the next 3 most played decks at rank 5 and above, and those are all at 4%. So 1 in 20 games is a Bomb Warrior, or Token Druid, or a Midrange Hunter. And then the Zoolock rounds out the top of the list at 3%. So if you're having an experience where you're playing any deck other than Temple Rogue, Control Warrior, or Mech Hunter more than once in 10 games, you are an anomaly, and the algorithm is out to get you.
Wow.
So what's the answer, guys? What's the answer, right? There's this rock, paper, scissors thing going on, because we know what's going on here. Like, Temple Rogue is at the top of the meta, and Control Warrior is right behind it. Why is Control Warrior right behind it? X?
Oh, because it beats Rogue.
Bingo, right? And why is Mech Hunter right behind those two, Eric?
Because it beats no.
X has got it. It can take on both of them.
Right. So that's why we see this clear rock, paper, scissors of these 3 decks, right? And Dragon Age is in there because it's kind of like Mech Hunter, where it can beat the top 2 decks, but also gets crushed by more aggressive decks. So that's an overview of the meta. It's almost identical or very, very similar stat-wise and structure-wise as it was last week. So what's the answer? Last week we talked about I think it was Dragon Mage is what we talked about being or was it Khadgar Mage, which is basically it's a different version of the same thing, but some variation of Khadgar kind of was the answer, and we saw that rise. We saw it come to be the fourth most played deck because it was a good counter to what we're seeing. So along the same lines, we want to kind of give you an answer. If you're getting frustrated with these decks, and a lot of people have been playing a lot of these decks, it's 60% of 1.5 million games on this segment. That's 700,000 games. That's a huge number, right? This week, I would suggest that you look at playing. Let me get rid of these and bring the deck list up here. Oopsie, let me get the right one. Secret Hunter. Secret Hunter is the deck right now that is kind of the counter to most of the common decks that are in that top 10 deck list that I was talking about, specifically the top 4 or 5. All right, let me give you some numbers real quick to support why this particular list, which has a 58% win rate across all of those ranks, is kind of a go-to default list. If you want to grind one deck, this is kind of the deck right now to do it with. And we saw that as reflected, it's the tier 1 deck right now. And why is that? It's got a 54% win rate against Bomb Hunter, which is an advantageous coin flip, right? Against virtually any mage being played right now, its lowest win rate is 58%. Its highest win rate is 74%. And that's including the various Khadgars and the various like tempos and things like that. Against Rogue, it's 61%. That's huge. You got a deck that can beat Rogue, the number 1 most played deck on the ladder. It's 2 out of 3 games, or a third of the games you're going to be playing, and it's going to win 2 out of 3 of those. Even that alone, I mean, you could theoretically play nothing but Rogue and get to Legend in 40 games or whatever. And it's 65% to 74% against all other Rogues being played. So if you're running into Miracle Rogue or some sort of like Togwaggle Rogue or something, this beats those decks better than 2/3 or 3/4 of the time. Zulak, it's 60%. Murloc Shaman, it's 54%. Against Control and Big Shaman, it's 70% against those decks. Yeah, and then Control Warrior, Bomb Warrior, it's 58 and 55% against those decks. And Mechathun Warrior, it's a whopping 68%. And Mechathun Warrior is important to note because Mechathun Warrior is the answer to Control Warrior. Like it just wrecks Control Warrior. So if you're running into Mechathun Warrior on a regular basis, which I have been, this deck does well against that. So as you can see by these stats, it's a well-rounded deck that's positioned right now to kind of be a deck that you can ride on the high-ranking ladder right now. Guys, any thoughts on that? Anything I've thrown out there?
Shock for me, honestly.
Yeah.
I think the biggest curiosity with this deck is how it's able to keep a sustained threat against Warrior. Like just say a straight up Control Warrior. Because I know that was a bigger issue before with with just other traditional secret decks. Secret Hunter for last expansion, it would be, hey, you kind of have to rely on Rexar. You get Rexar, you win the game. But if you were to say take Rexar out of that equation, what's kind of the reload that this deck really thrives on?
Zul'jin is probably the biggest answer in this deck because basically you stall with this deck a lot and then use Zul'jin to kind of push you ahead. But you have to time it well against their brawl. Fun. But this deck wins against most of these controller decks just by playing aggressive. It's a mid-range deck, and you play it aggressively. And you use the value generation that you get from things like Secret Keeper and Sunreaver Spy to just build a big board that they have difficulty dealing with. Because we know that Warrior runs out of steam. If you're putting 2 or 3 threats on the board at a time, they just run out of steam. And then once you've run out of steam, you use Zul'jin to reload and then push it home. But by playing a secret in conjunction with Secret Keeper or Sunreaver Spy, and then coupling that with things like the Masked Contender to get a little bit more value out of it, you're just putting so much stuff on the board that they have to play around that you can just kind of slowly but surely keep 2 or 3 consistent creatures on your board by protecting it with secrets that they can just constantly tick away at them. If you can keep their armor low, eventually you can make that push to win the game. It can be a bit of a difficult fight against a Control Warrior. It is only a 55% win rate, but still it's a positive win rate, and it's a deck that you can play in the meta right now, and you have a good win rate against 2 of the hardest decks in the meta right now, which is a 55% win rate against Control Warrior and a 61% win rate against Rogue. And the reason why it wins against Rogue, it's real easy. Life Drinker. Life Drinker just gives it that little extra oomph to allow it to win against Rogue by putting a little extra damage on board and a body and giving it a little bit of health, which buys you that little bit of time to where you can stabilize and then turn the game back in your favor.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, my biggest thing that I was because usually in those long matchups, I usually expect to see like a Dire Frenzy come out. Which for anyone who's listening, a Dire Frenzy is not in this list,
Nope.
and it makes sense considering you are based around heavy secret usage and synergizing that with the minions that you do play, and the cards you should play as well. So yeah, it's interesting to know that Zul'jin really can pack that punch to get over that final hurdle.
Yep. Well, that's going to do it for the 10-minute minute for this week. So, guys, please go out, try Secret Hunter. Let me know how it does for you. I will post the deck code in chat right now while we move on to the next segment. But I did want to say, hey, guys, hit us up. Let us know how the deck does, because we always like that feedback. With that, I think we can move on into the deck dive, which is, interestingly enough, another Hunter list this week, which right here is going to be Bomb Hunter this week. X or Rude, what do you guys want to talk about this deck list a little bit?
Yeah. Here, X. I'll give you the floor if you want it, but
okay. Bomb Hunter is a deck. This is a list that I'm not familiar with. It runs a lot of interesting cards.
Yes,
and as you guys know, when I say interesting, I mean, well, interesting cards to where I would never run this list. But it's supposed to be an aggressive deck that hits people in the head. This had a very good win rate on 58%. HS Replay at 58%. It runs Defender of Argus. Yeah, that was another bad card that shouldn't be in here, as well as Whirl Glider and 9 lives. But this is the spicy and Mossy Horror. But this is the spicier list that we brought up for this show. It's just a deck. You hit him in the head, and then you stop not hitting him in the head because the game's over.
Eric, you suggested this particular version of the deck. And I was very intrigued when you did, because it is different than some of the more popular variations like X was talking about. Would you want to talk about why you thought this list was interesting to talk about?
Because it beat me on ladder.
Oh, no, that makes sense. No, I get it then.
Yeah. That was the first, and that was just the thing is like I saw 2 Mossy Horrors come out, and it was over the course of 2 nights, and I was like, okay, what's happening? And then a Defender of Argus as well. The Defender I took out of my Mech Hunter list, or Bomb Hunter, I should say, just because it's just not the card. It's not, you don't want to invest 4 mana on that. Right. But it has, as we mentioned, a 58% win rate over, I believe it was 700,000 games. Is that too high?
It was a big number. It was a big number. Yeah.
So clearly it's doing something right. Where Bomb Hunter really thrives going to be those matchups against Control Warrior and those matchups against Summoner Mage. If you get a Venomizer going off against a Summoner Mage, or if you get a Spider Bomb going off, it's just, you do that once and you've won the game.
Right.
No class has that kind of punch, I think. The same way that this deck does. It's a list that I actually stopped running because I was running into some trouble with keeping up pressure against certain warriors, but I blame that more on myself than anyone else. I think the 9 lives is also a very interesting kind of meme choice. It's something I took out of my main list, but for anyone who doesn't know, 9 lives, 3 mana card. You discover a mech that, or is it just a death rattle effect? Oh yeah,
it's a death rattle.
You discover a death rattle effect, or you discover a death rattle minion that died during the game. And then you can choose whichever one that you want. Then the death rattle effect goes off, and you get that minion back in your hand. So an interesting reload tool, which is probably why it had a higher win rate, especially against warriors, I assume, is just that little extra oomph that you could potentially have with like an Ursatron going off or something like that. Ursatron really is one of the biggest MVPs of this deck, in my opinion. But yeah, just a fun list. Those bombs pop off. The Mossy Horror is there, usually to take out Rogue's little 1/1s that it has on the board, or the 2/1s with the Southsea deckhand, and then you trigger your own bombs in the same breath. Pretty fun interaction. But yeah, that's kind of where it's at. And Bomb Hunter as a whole really has been seeing it. It's kind of like the little brother of the meta right now.
Right.
And Bomb Hunter is right behind him saying, hey, I'm gunning for you. It's the natural symptom of those 2 decks thriving. It's the fact that this one is starting to see its popularity rising.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ryan.
A lot of people have been talking about how much they love War Gear. I think the true hero of this deck, I mean, aside from the Ursatron, as you pointed out, Rude, is actually the Replicating Menace. I'd rather have Replicating Menace than the War Gear, because you know what? I love it when stuff gets left behind.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about this list is the inclusion of the Mossy Horror. And I think it's a card that has been included in these a lot because people just don't have ways to seal the deal with their bombs. They rely on the bombs a lot to seal the deal, to win the game. You get them to 6-8 life, and then you Mossy Horror and you Hero Power, and it's 10 damage to the face with Flark. And it's just a big burst finish at the end of the game. But you don't see a lot. I don't run it in my version. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to feature this deck, because I was like, here's a version of this deck that I would never run that has a very good win rate. And we like to bring a little bit of a different spin on things to the show here, just to show you that you don't have to do everything that's considered meta. Or you don't have to do everything that's considered to be the top tier version of a deck. That there are reasons why, in the right scenario, why a deck like this could shine over other versions. And to not be afraid to experiment, because somebody had to be the first to put Defender of Argus in here, and there was a reason for it, and it worked for a while, or this deck wouldn't have gotten 500,000 plays or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
the more and more I look at this list, it just wants to have the bombs do something, and that's kind of why you have Mossy. That's why you have Defender. That's why you've got even the 9 lives. I honestly would not be shocked to see a desperate 9 lives getting thrown out.
And
Bomb Toss is a fun card.
That's kind of where I was going with this, because it reminds me of the bomb warrior list that runs Sephorium. It takes what makes the deck strong to the max, and it's a very all-in strategy. And if you can get it off and you can win by turn 6 or turn 7 because of Flarks with things like Mossy Horror, then you're probably going to be in good shape. It's it's a backdoor aggressive version of this list where it's going to run out of steam, or it's going to get tripped up if you top deck a Defender of Argus on turn 5, you're probably hurting. But if you can get all the synergies to work off in the way that you want, you can get a very aggressive finish because of the bombs.
Last question. What do both of you think about Oblivitron? I purposely chose a list that did not have Oblivitron because I did not want people to craft Oblivitron. But what do you two think?
In this deck, it does not fit. In this deck, it doesn't fit. I'm still experimenting with it in various Mech Hunter decks. I know that another Hunter player that I talk to quite a bit, Sidious, he's experimenting with index, but it belongs more in a value oriented Death Rattle deck, right? Where you get the mechanical dragons, and you can get those big 7/7s out. It belongs more in a deck like that, or with more impactful, or combined with more impactful death rattles like the spider bombs, but not in a deck list like this. It's too all in. It's all in, even more than playing the Mossy Horrors is all in. I don't like it. And by the way, for me personally, I would consider experimenting with a Baron Geddon more than a Mossy Horror in this list.
Or
spicy.
Void Ripper.
Yeah, if it still existed, would be another great one as well. But
still put it in there. Play wild. Standard's not good enough.
Right. All right. Well, with that said, I think we can just chug along here and get into the coach's corner.
Okay, so yeah, if we're headed over into the coach's corner, can we do some Sports Center shit? Can we get wow? Thank you. This week in Coach's Corner, X will be discussing how to mulligan. So we talk a lot about, well, at least at the very least today, we talked a lot about numbers and percentages and what all this means. I want to break this down a little further and teach you how to swing them ever in your favor. So we were talking earlier specifically against Control Warrior. The Hunter deck that, as chose to feature, the Secret Hunter, had a 55% win rate over it. Well, that's assuming that both players are of equal skill level and equal fitness level and playing at their best and mulliganed correctly. So now, one of these things that we mentioned in particular right here was just the mulligan itself. How do professional players mulligan? How do I mulligan? How do these nerds mulligan? Well, the first thing that they do is they look across the table and they see what class they're playing against, and they go, another rogue. And then they're able to try to infer what deck it is from there. So we're seeing 30% tempo rogues on the ladder. So we would assume almost always that it's going to be a tempo rogue. However, there is that one jerk playing Mally rogue. So you mulligan completely wrong and you lose to him every time. But it's still improper to mulligan against Mally rogue because 30% of the time you're going to be mulliganing against tempo rogue, for example. Now, in the case of mage, you either need to mulligan against Khadgar mage or the Khadgar. Are they calling it spell mage now?
Conjurer's Calling. Yeah.
Yeah, the spell
Big
spell
mage.
you guys know what I mean, versus the one with the rabble bouncer and all that. The tempo orient versus the conjurer's calling is kind of what I'm getting at.
Right.
These mulligans are completely separate, and you need to kind of evaluate what the other person is doing. Have you played the other person before? How quickly they're making their mulligan and looking over their cards. Things are just going to be tips for you for how you should mulligan. And once you make this decision, you get to go on to step 2. Yes, we are only on step 2 of the mulligan process. You need to identify your possible paths to victory against the opponent's deck that you identified. So let's say you are playing against a Tempo Rogue and you're playing Secret Hunter. Well, what does the final turn of Secret Hunter against Tempo Rogue look like?
Me conceding.
You conceding.
No.
Okay. So it's either that or... I would say it's either that or it's dropping a Zul'jin on the board or one of your high impact plays where you're able to just flip the board around because they're going to have it. And then as soon as you slip that rug from under their feet, they can never get it back. And you know this. So you need to look for the cards that allow you to maintain position on the board until you can get your higher value cards. Because on average, your 6+ mana cards are better than his 6+ mana cards.
Yes.
So your goal is to extend the game with that. And you need to identify this on turn or before turn 1, before you even choose what cards you need to mulligan. Step 3. That's right. It's only step 3. You decide how greedy you can be. So in the case, we'll continue Secret Hunter against Rogue. Yeah, Secret Hunter against Rogue. Well, you know that you can be extremely greedy with your mulligan for 2 reasons. One, you are a somewhat favored matchup. Well, they say very favored. I'm going to be real with it. It's a somewhat favored matchup. People who just play Rogue are bad. It's a somewhat favored matchup. And, oh, come on, Brain. You're not just going to give up on me now. Okay, because it's a somewhat favored matchup and because you only have 1 drop, and the amount of 2 drops you have is so prevalent. The 2 drops are so prevalent in your deck because of how many secrets you're forced to run due to Subject 9 that you're never worried about throwing away all of your 2s because you need to have your Secret Keeper, you need to have your Sunreaver Spy, and you need to have your Mass Contender, and then matchup dependent, probably Rat Trap or Explosive Trap. And Az could give better information on that as well if you want to give him a follow and check him out tomorrow. Do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you need to make your judgments based off of that, what your final turn looks like and what all the turns leading up to going to look like for how greedy you can be. Do I need Secret Keeper to win? Do I ever win without Secret Keeper? Well, not on the coin. So I need to toss all 4 cards away. Hope to get Secret Keeper. I don't care if I had the perfect turn 2, turn 3, turn 4 lined up. If I don't play Secret Keeper on 1, I lose. So I toss it all away. It means you have to be very greedy.
And how you know that is because you envision how your turns all play out. So
exactly.
Yeah. So one of the important things that you touched on here, and I really want to reiterate, is that part of a correct mulligan is being diligent in taking your time and thinking about the information that your opponent is giving you, i.e., what deck they're playing is, especially at the lower ranks you go, the wider the variety is. So I pity people that are playing like rank 20 because it's really hard to figure out what your opponent's playing. But at rank 5, it's if you're seeing a rogue, it's almost always Temple Rogue. If you're seeing a warrior, it's almost always Control Warrior. If you're seeing a hunter, it's either Secret or Bomb, right? So you use that information and then you think, okay, this is what I have in my hand. What do I envision my victory condition looking like? And you dig for those things.
Yeah.
Inference is the name of the game. Making calculated deductions based on the information you get, and you're constantly reevaluating throughout the game after that. But it all starts with the mulligan. A lot of times we think we have lost the game because of bad RNG or this, that, or the other thing. There are many times where I look back at a game and I go, yeah, this went sideways and that went sideways. And at the end of the day, though, I say to myself, I probably mulliganed poorly.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can identify how you mulligan poorly and find ways to improve your mulligan choices, your win rate will go up. That's why you see pro players or people that stream a lot taking their time on their mulligan. Almost rarely, unless it's like an automatic obvious pick, almost never do you see somebody mulligans quickly on stream or in a professional setting.
And another good point that I like to bring up when it comes to the mulligan process, it is your chance to clear your head. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're playing Hearthstone, especially as a streamer, you just feel like you're getting beat up and beat up and beat up. You need to take that mulligan step to clear the last game out of your mind and prepare for the next one. That's why I like to take such a logical approach to the mulligan process, because it forces me to step back and look at it objectively and figure out how I'm going to proceed forward. This also helps me deal with tilt.
Mm-hmm.
You have any thoughts on the mulligan process, Eric?
What were you just saying? You were mentioning about how you can lose the game from the mulligan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly that both that and the tilt factor, I think, are both some of the core things that probably aren't the most obvious about the mulligan. There are so many times where you will, I mean, I'll even watch pros play, and I'll watch a way that a pro in a tournament mulligans a hand that may not have had the out the gate just oomph of a turn one, but it's a safe hand, and you think, you know what, I can get by in this game with this, and they'll dump all of it. They'll have, I wish I could have an example at the top of my head, but the amount of times I've really seen these really powerful openers get sent away because the pro knows not just their conditions, but the opponent's conditions and how they have to react with both of those factors involved. It's nuts. There's so many times. There's times I was watching Worlds. I'm like, how do you mulligan that? How do you get rid of that?
Right.
Which just goes to show that the higher that you go in Hearthstone, the skill levels are just nuts. But you see people, yeah. Anyway, so just like, I think a lot of the people who do mention that there's nothing they could have done about the way a game went, I think one of the first places you can start is evaluating your mulligan, and go to things like HearthstoneReplay.net and look at the cards on the deck that you're playing. Look at their win rate when played. Look at their win rate when kept. That sort of thing.
Or when drawn, yeah.
And when drawn, exactly. And then sort of evaluate your plays off of that for a day even. Just say, you know what, I'm just going to play normals today. That may not be the best because you run into normals and who knows what you're going to see at the same time. But maybe you don't care about your rank for a day. You just say, you know what, I'm just going to grind out some games with this information in mind and try to work that. You may not have the best correlation to it. You may end up having bad games. But it's an education, one. And two, statistically, you really shouldn't. And it's hard to take one-offs and say that that's the full case. So yeah, really take some time to do that. And I think you'll be surprised on how well the outcome can be for you and how much you can learn.
Yeah. And go for it.
I was just going to say the pros or the streamers are not being bitter, cynical, or complaining when they mulligan, especially when they mulligan hard for something and they say, "Well, I just lost." It's that sometimes can come off as like them being snide, but a lot of times they're just acknowledging the fact that their mulligan, when they try to mulligan for something in particular and they don't get it, it's such an important aspect of the game that that when they don't get the thing that they need, that they just know that statistically they are very, very disadvantaged, right? And that's not a reflection of them being bitter. It's a reflection of them understanding how important correct mulliganing and the correct start to the game are.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think the biggest thing that we can take away from today's Coach's Corner is that if for no other reason, the mulligan is important because that's the only decision point you have if you're one of the 1/3 of the people on the ladder playing Rogue.
Oh, it's too funny.
Well done.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Another episode of the Coach's Corner. We'll have sound effects soon.
Right.
I want you to come in like a boxer's robe or something. You got the hood over your head.
Oh my God! Right? Yeah.
Walking out to some music.
Like a checkered suit.
Yeah, just like
I got my Twitch
air
hoodie
punch
handy if that'll help.
Nice.
Easy.
I like it. Now cut the sleeves off.
Oh.
Oh man. Well, yeah. Let's transition this towards what we like to call the. We'll call it the close for today. But we have a little bit of time where we're going to address some of the things we brought up earlier in the show.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost is going to be the Twitter poll that I had mentioned at the very, very beginning. Thanks to my co-host being so kind to remind me. We'll see. Tune in next week to see what happens. But again, anyone who doesn't know, every week on the Eternal Orbit Twitter account, we post a poll gauging how people either think or feel or have experienced whatever we're asking about. This week's question: how often do you play Hearthstone single-player content? It was kind of because the whole solo content is going to be coming very soon to Hearthstone. And we've had some really, again, I'm still kind of just shocked by the results at this point, but I'll read them out for everyone. Right now, we're at the options here were, do you play single-player content weekly, few times a month, every few months, or every 6 months or more? So weekly right now is sitting at 10%, which even that I'm surprised by, to be honest. I was expecting maybe one vote. But even that would have surprised me. So to have such a high, I don't know. That's double, right? 10% is just 2 people.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Good job.
It's twice what I expected. We've got 25% of people saying a few times a month, which even that's a little shocking, to be honest. But it makes sense. I think a few people probably, especially if you have quests and things like that, which I should have worded the poll this week a little bit better to say just for entertainment versus obligation. But I think I'm not surprised that people do it a few times a month. Next up, 10% of people said every few months, which really was surprising for me. I thought the 25 and the 10 would be flipped, those most recent ones we just went over. And then finally, one I'm not surprised by, 55% of people said every 6 months or more.
Wow.
So yeah, again, this was influenced not just by the fact that Hearthstone is coming out with new content, but our thoughts on how replayable has the content that they put out already been, and you know, how engaging has it been to folks. So as you can kind of tell, 55% of people 6 months or more. That means that the engagement rate is not very high.
Yeah.
When did I
What did you
become
guys
a
vote
casual
in?
guy?
Yeah.
Well, first thing I want to note on there is that 20 votes is actually the most we've had on any of our polls so far. So we had quite a bit of feedback on this, a pretty big sample size, and with such a wide range of options, I feel pretty good about that. I know that for me personally, I voted a few times a month. I know that when these things are new, I play it a lot more, but it gets old. There's only so many times you can do a dungeon run or a rumble run where you're just like, okay, it's kind of more the same, right? And I just want to go play arena or something. So that number for me though is flexible. Like I said, if this content is as truly replayable as they say it's going to be, I know it's going to go up for me. But I'm not surprised to see the numbers because I think by and large, I think I'm just a reflection of what most people's experience is. They do it once or twice, or how many times they have to do it to unlock the card back reward or whatever the reward is, and then they just kind of go, I might play it again once in a blue moon if I'm bored, or don't want to play on ladder while I'm sitting on the bus. Other than that, though, it's just kind of like a thing that they forget about.
Yeah.
I play the solo content a lot. I don't like Monster. I said it earlier. I don't like Monster Hunt. I do like Rascan's Row. I did not like Boomsday. I did not like the Puzzle Lab. And if you would think someone like me, who's like, that's kind of my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love solo player content, that would fit right together. That just goes to prove Azrael's point. It's like when the stuff comes out and there's a lot of hype, it's fun because you want to be part of that group collective experience. Yeah. But then for most everybody, it falls off. I'm so surprised to see that most people voted every 4 to 6 months. And I was even more surprised to see that you thought more people would have voted that way, dude.
How'd you vote?
Honestly and truthfully. So I voted for, I was part of the 10% of every few months. When I'm playing, it's always Dungeon Run. Dungeon Run, in my opinion, is the best currently available solo content they have. Monster Hunt is way too similar, but not in a fun way. It's stripped down, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everything else. Boomsday, I agreed right there with X. I didn't think Boomsday's event was anything to write home about either. I actually just didn't finish it because I was like, well, it's not good when you're in the middle of it and you're just like, you know what, I don't care. Yeah, so yeah, wholeheartedly here for Dungeon Run. I end up playing it if I'm at like a doctor's appointment. I'm like, you know what, I want to sit down and do something, but I don't want to be committed to an actual game. So it's nice for that. And I think that's by far the most replayable. Mm-hmm. We had talked earlier, gold incentives really will be the way that they want to address replayability. I think unless they come out with like their own Slay the Spire or something, and there's just like we don't realize how much they mean by like high replayability kind of new solo content.
We didn't talk about that. I'll tell you right now, if they came out with like a Slay the Spire version of solo player, because I love Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is a very fun game. I can sit down and play Slay the Spire over and over and over again. There's been a few times in recent months where I've been stuck in an airport 3 times now. I've been stuck in an airport overnight, and in the last 6 months, where Slay the Spire like got me through it. It's just if they came up with a single player version of that and even put like microtransactions in to like unlock more content for it, I would be all over that. Oh my god, I would love that. Now that's the model.
Yes, I agree. If they made that Slay the Spire model for Hearthstone and put it on mobile,
oh man, game over. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad idea. Is anyone from Blizzard?
Yeah, one of the 18 viewers right now, are one of you guys a Blizzard executive, high-ranking Blizzard exec?
Well,
if you are,
I did kind of call out some of the high-ranking Blizzard execs last week.
yeah, I wish I should have clipped that, and I should have that. I'm gonna clip that in the future. I'm gonna have it on a button on my deck lab, be like boom, and it's just gonna take over the screen. It's gonna be you calling out Ixar.
Well,
You need to share it with the box wine. He would love it. He loves yelling at Ixar. He doesn't even play Hearthstone anymore.
yeah.
Yelling at Ixar.
Yeah, mid Apex game, just shouting Exile.
Ixar!
You never know though. It could be a cool thing. Blizzard that's the thing. Blizzard has like the kind of that in them to really surprise people, and that kind of flavor to really pack a punch that, hey, maybe they'll come out with something really cool like that. But that's what they would have to do. Otherwise, even if they just brought out another adventure and had wings, outside of the fact that they've done a really good job in their kind of adventures with, I think at least the production of it all. I really like the whole interaction of doing the Lich King.
Yeah.
With Knights of the Frozen Throne and all the voiceover lines. I had a lot of fun with the League of Explorers one where it's Harrison Jones, and just like they do a really good job of like voice lines and getting you part of this whole flavor of the environment that you're in and everything. It's all very well done. So,
and you play it through once and then you never touch it again.
Exactly. So
but
you're gonna have to work on that, Blizz.
Man, I'm now I've kind of got myself excited. I hope I'm not setting myself up for disappointment. But if they're being so hush hush about this, because this is going to be like, Blizzard's version of Slay the Spire, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to be so excited. Oh my God. I might spend more time streaming that than actual ladder play. Cause that's like super exciting.
Not to pop the bubble or anything, but there is a lot of information about what this game mode will entail. The replayability, I'll go into it slightly, is the fact that I think there's going to be so many available characters to play with so many different abilities.
I see.
Yeah,
even that
we'll share in the DM. Exactly, right? We'll share in the DMs kind of, because this is what we're going to be talking about next week as well.
Teaser.
But yeah, exactly. We'll just go with our idea of Slay the Spire and see what they can do.
I'm going to get myself excited because I love getting super disappointed when a game company lets me down. I'm looking at you, Bethesda and Fallout 76.
Rest in peace.
Oh man, again, it's such high hopes. But anyway, well, guys, thanks. I think we had a really good discussion today. I really enjoyed diving into especially I was talking about this with X before the show today. I love having deep discussions about aspects of the game that people don't talk about very much. Especially from like a learning standpoint. So the opportunity to dive into something that seems like so mundane as the Mulligan, like that kind of stuff really excites me. So I really appreciated getting a chance to do that with you guys. And I think we had a really good show, and I appreciate you guys doing this, and the viewers at home for being here with us. We will be back again next week at this time, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here for episode. Can you guys believe it? We didn't even really talk about this. We're on episode 10. Double digits.
Double digits.
Yeah.
We'll be on episode 11 next time.
I know, and hopefully we'll have some solo content. Who am I kidding? We're gonna talk about the announcement of the preview of the solo content. Until then, though, I'm Azrael as it gets, signing off on another episode of The Orbit with, as always, my co-hosts Exiles Rhythm and Rude Clouds. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time right back here. Until then, have fun and see you around. Goodbye.
Buy the merch.